Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to share my presentation. Okay, hopefully everyone can see it. So thanks to all of our partners here, Delaware Bio and the World Trade Center in Delaware, and of course my very good friend and partner in all things, Vered. The Philadelphia Israel Chamber has really been our top partner. I represent Bern on the East Coast and Midwest, and there are a lot of states and a lot of companies that could potentially leverage this program. So to have a partner that can really bring the opportunity to companies in Delaware, as well as Pennsylvania and South Jersey, is really an advantage for those states. So as always, I really thank Barrett and of course all the partners. So as we said, bird, nothing to do with birds, not technically a foundation. It's technically a federally funded U.S.-Israel R&D program with funding from both countries. So it's been around for a very long time, since 1977, in fact, and has a really innovative funding mechanism. It's actually was started as a joint endowment between the United States and Israel, with each country putting in 50-50 for the purposes of promoting joint innovation towards collaboration between US and Israeli companies. It's a risk-sharing mechanism, meaning the countries are sharing in the risk. The United States and Israel have put in 50-50, and the companies are sharing in the risk because it's actually a matching grant. So it's a dollar to dollar, it's dollar to dollar towards the development and funding for all of the, for the projects that we're investing in. We have a board with government, people from the government on both sides. For our general board, it's the U.S. Department of Commerce, specifically the NIST, together with the State Department and the Treasury, and then similar ministries on the Israeli side. And they're the ones that actually make the final selections. So how does it work? So again, like I said, it's a risk-sharing mechanism. It's non-dilutive funding, or what we call a recoverable grant. Two companies, a US company and an Israeli company, are jointly developing a technology or product that will get to market. And we can put in dollar to dollar towards each of their development costs, and up to $1 million per project, meaning that this would be approximately a $2 million joint project budget to leverage the full million. And typically these are 18 to 24 month duration projects. We now have a $1.5 million maximum for exemplary projects. So we invest in all technology sectors with the exception only of military specific technology. So you can see here, this is what our pipeline looks like currently, or at least up till 2020. And you'll see that if life sciences together with healthcare IT is actually the largest part of our portfolio. Energy, water, environment coming in second, but there's a reason for that, so which I'll get to later. It's been a successful program for both countries with return on investment, which you don't see very often in a government-funded program. But from that initial 110 million, we've funded over 370 million. We've approved over 1,000 projects, and in repayments, we're now at over our 110 million, therefore the return on investment. But much more important on behalf of both countries and for the economies, we're looking at about a $10 billion $10 billion that both governments have benefited, basically relating to sales that were generated either directly or indirectly from the projects that we funded. So what does success look like when we talk about that $10 billion figure? What does it really include? How is that quantified? So sales, as I mentioned, obviously, the companies are selling their product, but they're also creating jobs in both countries, the R&D jobs, manufacturing jobs, operations jobs, and so on. It creates a lot of capital raise, because once a company is approved, they do need to come up with their match, and smaller companies often do that by raising capital. And therefore, the validation that comes with being approved by both governments is something that helps them to do that. M&A, the U.S. company, or one of the companies may acquire the other, or a company may be acquired as a result. Companies establish R&D centers, especially U.S. companies in Israel. Israeli companies will oftentimes establish their headquarters or operations in the United States, and obviously the export that comes from the completed technologies and products being sold all around the world globally. So what are we looking for in our projects? So innovation, innovation, innovation. That's the top thing we want to see. Really projects that show that they're on that verge of disruptive technology. We want to see that there's good synergy between the two companies. Typically, we're looking at projects that have complementary technologies between the two companies. We want to see that they have a defined market opportunity, they can quantify it, and finally, that they have a sound commercialization strategy. And that typically means that one of the two companies have the experience, ability, and distribution network to get that technology or product to market. Why do they come to us? We have large multinational companies that are taking advantage of our measly 1 million. And why are they interested in it? So surprisingly, the funding is important, even in the case of large companies that are broken into smaller R&D divisions, and they actually need that funding. It's a risk-sharing mechanism. So the companies are working on this, but they know that they have government support, and the government's willing to come in and share with them in the risk, and hopefully share with them also in the benefit. The validation is very important, as I mentioned before. It allows for these companies to raise additional capital. It helps them with sales and marketing. And finally, getting this funding, and it really brings this technology to market faster. It accelerates it faster than it would have had we not gotten involved. When is our next cycle? We have 2 a year, and the next one starts September 2nd. We have the executive summary. Companies at that point already have to have a partner, and they submit this executive summary jointly. We review them, we give them a recommendation, yes, move forward, or no, don't waste your time. If they do, they submit a full-scale proposal by October 12th. It's evaluated by expert evaluators on both sides through the NIST, through what's called the Israel Innovation Authority, and our board selects the projects in December. And all of that happens again, starting again in March. So these are 4-month cycles. September to December is the next one. March to June is the one after that. Now, we have other programs that started as a result of the success of this program. One is an energy program. The deadline for actually our annual energy program is tomorrow, so I won't go into it that much, but for energy projects can also submit to our regular cycle, but that one's coming up. The only difference is the funding comes appropriated through the DOE and the Israeli Ministry of Energy. And one of the two partners can be a university or research institution. Other than that, everything is the same. The money is the same. What we're looking for is the same. It's just very focused on energy-related topics that you'll see here. All kinds of clean tech, renewable, energy efficiency, natural gas-related technologies, and energy water nexus. Similarly, we have one for Homeland Security. Again, as a result of the success of the regular bird and what we call bird energy, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the Israeli Ministry of Public Security came to us and said, will you administer a program for us? Here's some money to do that. And for that, we have Bird Homeland Security. It's also once a year. We're already kind of in the midst of that one. All kinds of Homeland Security related technologies. And finally, U.S. Israel Energy Center, which I'm not going to go into now unless anyone has any questions, because we've already selected the projects for that one. So with that, I'll conclude by saying there are 2 projects in Delaware recently that we would like to highlight, and one of those you're going to hear more from the Christiana Care, a fascinating project that they did with Novellus. And lots of projects in healthcare, and if we have time afterwards, maybe I can go through some of them. So with that, I turn it back over to Vered, and thank you all very much. Look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much for the terrific presentation, and as always, it's fun to work with Andrea, and anytime anybody has questions, Andrea and I are available. And it's my pleasure to introduce my dear friend and a bird recipient, Eric Kamesh. He has the Gene Institute at Christiana Care, and I'd love to hear from him. Go ahead, Eric. Floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and
Great.
let me figure out how I'm taking the spotlight from.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
Thanks very
please
much,
do.
Jared, and it's great to see Andrea.
Hi, Eric.
Long and wonderful relationship walking through the Bird Foundation. So I'm really glad to be here to maybe help kind of walk you through what our work with Novellus was like initially, and then tell you a little bit about my take on the Bird Foundation, which has turned out to be very positive. I must apologize. I've actually we just moved into some brand new laboratories here, and some of the technical stuff is kind of working. It's all really great, and we're on the Star campus, University of Delaware now. So if something happens funny here, hopefully it won't be because of me. It'll be more because of the technology. I asked Vera to kind of share the screen and run the slides because that is one of the things we've had a little bit of trouble with. It's getting worked out. There are actually people on site right now trying to do that. So Vera, if you want to just share the screen, I'll begin to kind of walk through. What I thought I'd do is to tell you a little bit about what we are doing, and then hopefully you'll see why this grant actually fit in quite well to some of our missions. And I'll tell you about the grant and then about the things that it generated, because for us, it's actually kind of an interesting story. It didn't end with the end of the grant. We're actually completely through. It actually has continued, and I think that's one of the better fallouts of the whole program, that you do develop good partnerships and good relationships with entities you would never meet other than through Bird. And for us, it's a continued relationship. So
just a second, I have a technical problem. I don't know why I cannot bring it up. I see it on my side, but I don't think you guys see it. So I apologize for the hiccup here in sharing. Once more time. There we go.
There we go. That's great. Okay. So at first, like I said, I want to tell you a little bit about us to give you some context into what we're actually involved in. And we are divided into 3 different missions: discovery research, education and outreach, and translation research. And obviously the Bird Grant focused in primarily on the transition and our role from discovery to research, and it led to a lot of partnerships. We are adding them daily. We have a very large education program which has grown almost organically and is really now heavily involved in the gene editing space. We're now joining Pennsylvania and Maryland with some programs. Drexel University is signed on, and BMS is now part of it as well. And it appears as if a couple of places in Maryland are going to jump on board. And then our translational side, we focus on oncology, developing CRISPR-related gene editing strategies to augment sort of standard of care. And it was in that space that we began to reach out to a couple Israeli companies I think if you go to the next slide, Vera, thank you, that kind of sees where BIRD sits. The BIRD Foundation was crucial a couple of years ago in establishing our transition from discovery research into product development. We will launch a few new products probably in the next 2 to 3 months, including a software program and a CRISPR-in-a-box gene education product. But it was really important for us to be able to, on the oncology side, to be able to get a foundation that sat between the two bubbles here. We've always been fortunate to have good NIH support. The Moseley Foundation has been terrific to us, as has NSF. But a lot of people talk a great deal about translational research, but the BIRD Foundation and the Ammon Foundation, to a lesser extent, have been instrumental in getting ourselves from discovery into commercialization. And BIRD actually became very important because we were able to partner with a company who was focused on commercialization. So that's a very important link. It'll remain there, even though the grant is technically over. It has created a very strong partnership with us, with Novellus, and I'll talk about a little further because we're about ready to start to do more with them. And without the BIRD grant, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So go to the next slide. So this is basically the partnership that we formed. Novellus was a is a diagnostic company based in Jerusalem, outside Jerusalem, and in Tel Aviv. And they basically ran through a series of very sophisticated diagnostic assays that were aimed at personalized cancer medicine. So the idea that they had was that if a physician would order genomic analysis of a tumor, liquid or solid, then the genomic information, vis-a-vis DNA sequencing, would reveal the type of mutation that was present inside the tumor. And of course, they understood it was mosaic. They were very talented folks, but there was always a driver mutation that generally had some sort of influence on the rapid growth of the tumor. They then would then design and develop a system of care which they would provide back to the physician to initiate it. And this was going along fairly strong and quite successful. And they had demonstrated that they were doing a lot better than folks who did not use genomic information. And yet, I actually remember very well learning about BIRD by seeing Vera at an event like this. Actually, I think it's about maybe 1,000 feet from me in one of the auditoriums outside of where our current lab, our new lab exists. And she came up to Nick Petrelli and I and said, geez, you guys might be a good candidate for the BIRD Foundation. And I got a chance to talk to Andrea. And the next thing you know, literally, I got on the phone, which of course these days means email, and cold emailed about 10 companies that I had been provided a list by Andrea and Vera on, and Novellus called back or emailed back, and the rest is history, as they say. So this relationship actually began by me getting down and dirty and essentially digging through it. And that's my first message. You got to do your homework. I heard Andrea's wonderful presentation, and I learned something actually every time I listen, something new. She said that they are looking for complementary skill sets. And so we were in the oncology space. We have the privilege of being Christiana Care's Helen F. Graham Cancer Center. And that's where we felt we could help with CRISPR as an augmentative therapy to standard of care therapy for cancer, particularly for solid tumors. So long story short, it worked. We were able to create a wonderful partnership. At the end, I have a slide about some ideas about how to approach the grant for everybody. But that's really how this all started. We did go through one round where we didn't get funded, but received some outstanding feedback that pretty standard for the NIH folks who are on the line. You know, you have to kind of revise it. I don't know how it works within BIRD, but feedback made us better. And even though at the time, Ron was the representative, and I battled with Ron a lot, you know, because, but he actually calmed me down and said, no, listen carefully, we did it. And then we got the wonderful call at 5:30 in the morning, by the way, to Christianicare's chief financial officer, who called me immediately. So he knew before I did, but that's a very good thing. If you get good news, you definitely want to call Rob McMurray at Christianacare. He was really happy about it, and Christiana was quite thrilled. So it really does require you to do your homework. Not every grant gets funded. It is not an easy process because they're looking for unique things, and Andrea actually cited them already. So if you go to the next slide, I'll kind of explain what we did. So going back to what Novellus was really trying to do, Novellus was trying to utilize genomic information to personalize cancer therapy, and it was going well. In fact, it was going a little bit too well that they couldn't keep up with the information. And so they turned to us and they asked us to try to use CRISPR to recreate the mutations, the information they had gotten from the patient's genomic DNA, and then be able to develop an assay. And the young woman in the middle is Brett Sansbury, who is pretty well known out of our lab for developing what's known as gene editing on a chip. Brett developed a way to do CRISPR as a diagnostic piece for cancer therapy. She actually, as an aside, actually worked on the Sherlock kit as we worked with MIT and the COVID-19 pandemic. We received an NIH grant to do that. So we had a pretty good idea of how to use CRISPR, and the partnership went well. The BIRD Foundation liked it, and we were able to move forward. So I think the next slide shows us on a trip to Israel. That's the other good thing about this, is that you have a chance to do exchange work. There's Brett and Amanda Hughes and I standing at the Novellus headquarters just outside of Jerusalem. It was an amazing trip. Obviously, I don't need to sell Israel to anyone on this call. If you have a chance to go. Don't hesitate. Gabby Tasic is on the far right there, and Michael Vidney, who at the time actually was the chief operating officer. He's now, as 4 Therapeutics evolved, and I'll tell you about what's happening there. He's now taken almost a CEO position. I think he still technically remains COO. I'm not quite sure what his title is, but it was a great visit. And Brett and Amanda were able to transfer the information to Shaul Barth, who's the tallest guy in the room there. I stuck Amanda next to him because I didn't want to be, she's almost as tall as I am. So, but we had a wonderful time. Very intense work. We worked almost continuously for about 48 hours to transfer the technology, which is how our grant worked. We developed it, we did the innovation and the optimization, and then we transferred it over to Shaul and his team to be able to implement it under Gabby's great thing. And then Shaul actually and other people came to Christiana shortly after this. They came back, and we actually had 2 visits on both sides and got the assay working great. So the experience was terrific. They took the assay and they're using it now in discovering cancer drugs, which was kind of a bit of an inflection point, but that had very little to do with the work. It just was really a financial decision, and let me talk about that toward the end. So the next slide shows you that not only had we worked together on a couple of projects for implementation, the paper in the upper left-hand corner is actually the assay we developed for Novellus, or with Novellus, and we were delighted to put Erez and Gabby as authors on that paper. That paper has received a fair bit of attention because it actually goes through in great detail about how we've actually created the system. And then the paper on the upper right-hand corner is another combination. I think they're actually authors on another one somewhere in here too. So the point about showing you this is that it's great science. Your partners in Israel I believe, are the finest technologists in the world. because I've had firsthand knowledge of seeing them, and they work very tightly together. And I mean, Andrea can comment later about this, but our relationship was very, very close, both personally and professionally. I think we had a great deal of respect for each other, and they were very instrumental in helping us work the assay through. And that's another benefit from this kind of partnership. You get access to great technologists, and Virid continued on with me, and I'm now part of the Israeli gene editing consortium, so I get information. I don't think we've told them I'm not in Israel yet, but hopefully they won't find that out. But a lot of sidebar reactions come out of these kind of relationships, so it was really great. The next slide shows that we developed some patents with them. It's the, I think, the fourth or fifth one down there, where Mike and Gabby are part of our patent, and we're prosecuting them. They prosecute them internationally, and we do them in the U.S. That was part of the agreement, which turned out to be very simple to get to write and to do. So lots of other good things happen. Patents are filed. You get to use them jointly, mutually, and we also have a chance to publish some very good academic work with outstanding scientists. And again, they make us better because they're very critical readers of the work, and that's always very helpful. As I come down the home stretch here, I just want to move to the next slide to tell you something very interesting. As I mentioned, we're launching a new tool to teach high school kids and community college kids and four-year college kids now how to do CRISPR. And we have just beat our competition on a couple of head-to-head comparisons. We did it blindly, so we're pretty excited, and we partnered with Rockland on this, who are the biomanufacturers. So this will be officially launched around the first week of August. And the reason I put that in there is that this is actually part of the reaction we developed with Novellus. So we were able to, Brett's initial work was not only good for the mutagenesis assay and the cancer diagnostic, it actually led to this kind of thing. And Novellus was wonderful. It's not their space, but they gave us full rights to Christiana to push this out. And as an aside, Christiana is happy to make money on certain kinds of things, but the amount of philanthropy we have received to make this available to high school kids in Delaware for free has been amazing. So those relationships with this Israeli company really count. And if you develop a close one, you can move on to these kind of products, which has led to the product that's listed on the next slide, which is a series of videos which are now reaching the African-American community in Wilmington and beyond. And we're delighted to have Janice Nevin, our CEO, introduce the video series. This is going to be marketed by a couple of other companies, and it really gets into moving gene editing into the underserved population, underrepresented populations. It's one of the few that have done that. So ultimately, we're delighted because, again, my point in showing you these things is that there is a lot of fallout if you do things right on a bird grant. It isn't just the money you get, and it isn't the product you develop. Some very good things can happen. So, and then my next to the last slide just shows us what we looked like last week in our new space. This is the entire team. I think there's actually one more person who's coming in July who's not pictured there. But those are all the folks that are working from the beginning. If you look right in the middle in the maroon sweater, that's Brett Sansbury, and she now has joined us full-time leading the discovery research group. We expect even bigger things out of her. So the last slide just gives you some thoughts I have on the bird grant. So the bird grant is detailed and challenging, and it should be. It's a lot of money and it's serious. And so is it worth the effort? It absolutely is worth the effort. What's the key to making a good application? Andrea actually said it, and that is that you need complementary skill sets, and you need a partner that's willing to put the time in. If you think you're going to write this at the 11th hour, don't do it. It's too much work and too much pain. And there are, as Beard has reminded me a number of times, relatively large corporations. I think American Water Corporation has received a couple of bird grants and done great things with it. So they are open to all kinds of unusual combinations of things. And we, as part of Christiana Care, the grant was actually with Christiana Care. We were just the executors of it. So the size doesn't really matter here too much, as long as there's a complementary skill set and you can do something good. Keep in mind, bird grants are not NIH research grants. You have to have the idea pretty well developed and able to be translated. A term we all know is overly used in the field is translational research. Most people don't really understand what that means, but the bird grant is actually translating basic discoveries that have already been made that might need some optimization, but have a clear product. They have a clear projection, and that's very important. It's a very different objective than discovery research, and we understood that from the beginning. And if we didn't understand it, Mike Bidney reminded me almost every day about that. So he was very, very insistent, and he was right. One of the things in the application are a series of tasks and outcomes and expected times. And that's not something that folks like me are used to, because we usually can write NIH grants. It'll literally take 55 years to do and think it's only going to take 5. Well, with BIRD, it's different. And they do want those tasks achievable. Outline achievable goals with well-demarcated tasks, equally divided or not, but be clear. So for example, our grant was not split 50-50. Now, I'll get to that at the end, both in work or not, but we agreed with that up front, and we knew which tasks we would do and which tasks Novellus would do. The return on investment must be evident and presented up front. Very important. Tell the reviewers how BIRD's going to get paid back, quote unquote, for supporting you, but also get that up front. Don't make them dig for it within it. And it's the reason I'm saying that is because in our grant, even though it was very toward the front, it wasn't front enough. And so when we write the revised version, we got almost no comments back. They just wanted to know what the hell were these guys doing, and we needed to get that up front. To avoid problems downstream, as we did with our evolution of our education thing, intellectual property ownership needs to be clearly defined. As everybody on this call knows, some better, much better than me, but I can tell you, being in the CRISPR field, this is a very hotly contested area. Make sure the partner and you define how your patent's going to work. And then the thing that actually worked really well for us was that we didn't divide the money 50-50. It went about 60-40, 65-35, because Novellus was willing to take the commercialization arm and risk. And so they had to pay the grant back. And amazingly, they have already done that. We just heard that they paid it all back. Glad to see Andrea got the money there. They told me that, Andrea, but I wanted to be sure because Mike Finney jokes around with me too much. And now, just as a final parting story, they have evolved into 4 Therapeutics, a much bigger company. Part of it was based on the work they had done with us, but they raised a great deal of money. And I think my own perception is, and Michael kind of confirmed this recently on a call with Christiana and us, that they have chosen Philadelphia as their home base. So we're delighted to be part of this. It was a great relation. And if I can leave you with anything important, if you choose wisely up front on the partnership, it's a great program, but you can also develop a lasting relationship, and God knows where things go in this field. They started as a diagnostic company. We developed a great assay for them, but rather than try to scale it up to diagnostic, which is a very difficult thing to do, they're using it now in their drug discovery program, which is the platform for 4 Therapeutics. So I'll stop there and happy to entertain any questions and answer anything about the presentation.
Before Vered goes into, I just want to say that was probably the most awesome bird presentation from a bird grantee I think I've ever seen. And we do dozens and dozens and dozens of these.
Oh, great, so thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I'm so glad this is recorded. One thing that you left out, however, and I left it out as well, is that one of the most important things that you look for in a bird when we're evaluating projects, and one of the most important things that you need is a very strong champion, especially in a large organization like a hospital or a large company. Without that strong champion, a project can just go awry, not finish. And so I want to say that I know from firsthand experience is Eric was an extremely strong champion. And it is because of you that this project was completed and was so successful. Your intent to reapply, understanding the reasons for that. And I think that it's very evident from all the success that you've had. So I don't want to continue.
Yeah, I think, Andrea, as you know, this is, so the application really is more of a business science / science application. It's almost like writing a business plan to a large degree. And the science is, well, our science was generally reviewed. Of course, Ron didn't tell us who it was, but it was reviewed by scientists at NIST. And then the Israelis review the other side on their side. So you don't get, mom and pop review. They placed our feet to the fire and made us better. And in fact, some of their comments helped us in other projects. So this is unlike a lot of the times at NIH and federal grants, which are kind of designed on where you are and who you are at times. This, the bird wants you to be, they want you to be successful. So they are offering really helpful hints about things going forward. And if things are kind of not going to fall down, they probably won't give you, if they see a big problem up front at the pre-award or the pre-full proposal point, they'll let you know this needs a little more work even at that point. So it was great. It was, you want to strangle reviewers that don't give you a grant, but in the end, if you actually step back and review your own work, they made us better, and that's very important.
I think this is time to take some questions from our audience, and we have 2 already lined up. I just want to mention that I second Andrea, you've been a terrific champion from the first moment it clicked, you understood what it is and you went for it, and the drive was evident and contributed to all of that. And I want to say, Andrea also mentioned another project in Delaware, and we have another one that just won last year. It's just not public yet, but Brian Tracy, who some of you know as the former president of Delaware Sustainable Chemistry Alliance, he won a grant when he was with University of Delaware, a small company, and now he has a company, White Dog Labs, and they have investors in Israel. They have an office in Israel. They have evolved significantly because of their investors in Israel. So when you do a grant, you really need to find what your company needs. Don't look for the money, look for what you need, and the sky's the limit.
Very sophisticated idea in grant writing, absolutely.
The other thing I want to mention on this call, we have partners from Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. You need to reach out to Carla, to Michael, to others. We have here Galen Barr from Pittsburgh and others. We are all here for you. And then the scope is not just Delaware, because projects like that, as you can see with Fort Biotherapeutics, become regional. And what we want Israeli companies to understand the value of being in this 3-state area and really grow their ecosystem and grow their opportunities and collaboration. So when Eric joins a consortium for gene and cell therapeutics in Israel, people say, "Ah, you're in Philadelphia," and then they come here. And for them, Philadelphia, they don't know Philadelphia. It's the 3 states, okay? So now we're gonna, they really don't. For them, New York and Philadelphia and whatever, it's the same. And I'm an Israeli, can say it. So let's look at the chat and what do we have here? We have, can you detail how the grant is paid back after commercialization? You touched on it, but maybe you could have, if the person who said, this is Neil Sweeney, do you have any specific question, Neil, about that? Because I think we covered it.
Actually,
we can't hear
you. I didn't cover it because no, I didn't cover it.
Yeah.
Typically it's in the Q&A and it just brings my presentation longer than 15 minutes that I have. But this is non-dilutive funding, meaning at the end of the day, we're not taking any equity or IP. and it does not need to be repaid if there is no success, meaning there are two triggers for success. One is revenue, and then it's a royalty-based repayment mechanism. And the other is a successful milestone, which triggers a repayment. I believe in the Christianity they used the milestone.
Milestone, yeah, yeah. $80 million was a good milestone, Andrea, for so yeah.
Yeah, they did very well.
Yeah.
But the way that it works technically, and I think on the chat I put a link to where you can refer to. In fact, I'll just quickly share my screen so you can just see it. And this is right on our website in that link that I put. So if it's successful, meaning if the companies have received, and this is pretty much for the royalty-based repayment for revenue. If there's success, then there's a minimum of 5% royalty paid back to Bird, specific to what we funded. So if it's a component of a larger product, it's not 5% revenue on the entire product, it's just 5% specific to what we funded. And that's something that, that the company signed an agreement with us before their project starts, specifying what that would be. So each year that there is any revenue related to the project, there's a requirement to pay 5% of that revenue back to Bird. The companies can decide within the first year after project completion just to repay what we gave them, and then there's no acceleration to that. After that first year, there is acceleration, like you see on this chart, up to the 5th year at which it's capped. So there is a cap to it of 150% of what we gave the companies. It doesn't go up after that, no matter how long it takes the companies to repay it. But it could also be partial repayment. So if after 10 years, after whatever it happens to be, there's the technology is no longer being used, the product is no longer being sold, then there's nothing that needs to be repaid. And basically, this is just paying forward. So any repayments that we receive back to Bird go to fund other projects. And that allows us to fund more projects per year. But it's a little more involved. This is more simplified. If anyone has any questions, they can refer to me or to Violet or to Eric. He's probably an expert on it as well. Violet, I'm turning it back to you.
Any more questions? Please stop sharing the screen. Any more questions? I think that a lot of questions that people shy of asking is like, how is it to work with Israelis? Like, why should you A, go into a joint venture to begin with, and B, God, they're on the other side of the world, and most of us think about them as the people with the camels and the bombs. Why would you even go through that trouble, Eric?
Basically for the wine. No, well, I think you are right. I mean, it's obvious that is a troubled part of the world, but I can tell you, I've gone twice, and once by myself. I was actually invited before we got the grant, in between our two submissions. Novellus asked me to come and meet with their scientific advisory group, which included a Nobel laureate. So that was a wonderful opportunity. There are a lot of Nobel laureates at the Weizmann and up and down in Israel, or associated with Israel, that come back on a regular basis. And I think one of the things that intrigued me was just, number one, I very conscious of the security risk, but I can't tell you how secure that is. I remember landing in Germany and having to find the terminal, which is Israeli terminal, and I lost about 6 pounds walking under the thing, the tarmac to get there. So from a personal standpoint, I felt completely secure. They're remarkably good at this, unfortunately. And from a professional standpoint, if you go to a Bird Award dinner anywhere, they will play you a video which tells you the technology, and this had an influence on me, I'm not kidding, the amount of technology that has come from Israeli companies. Just about everything you're looking at right now, including your phone, have been fundamentally based on Israeli technology. So the opportunity to work with some extremely advanced technically well-schooled, well-disciplined scientists was overwhelming for us. And I decided that was it. And then the next time we went, Brett and Amanda and my wife and Richard Deshevsky, who was General Counsel Christiane, and his wife, everybody kind of made a trip. And we were, and in the last evening we had a kind of a success dinner, and that dinner was at a restaurant, and I'm sure Andrea and Vera know is at the wall of the old city. And you go to these places, and this is where the three major religions of the world started, and they're within 2 miles of it. It's just an extraordinary experience, personally moving, and it made us better because we wanted to work more. So I think on the both professional and personal side, it was kind of a no-brainer, frankly. And with all the caveats associated with travel these days and security, just the Novellis scientists made us better, and now we're also interacting with them at 4, and we'll probably put together a nice joint project very soon. So just the quality of the technology and the scientists. I mean, Weitzman probably doesn't get as much press as it should, but there's not many better places there. And in our field in gene editing with CRISPR, outstanding work is coming out of that consortium. So they argue like crazy, which is fun to watch occasionally, but they always leave the room arm in arm. And that is one thing I had to get used to. Don't take it personally. They really go at it. But in the end, it's very constructive. So it was a great experience.
Eric, it's funny that you mentioned that. We have another grantee from Connecticut, and when he gives his presentation, he brings up the same story that when he first spoke with the team in Israel, and he's a small startup energy company, was working with Israel Chemical, with a very, very large company. And he said, it was just him, the CEO on the US side, and it was this a large group of people on the Israeli side, and he was only on the phone. So, this was some years ago. And he said, he's speaking, then all of a sudden it sounds like everybody's like a shouting match in Hebrew. So he didn't understand what even was going on. And he was getting more and more concerned as the meeting was going. And afterwards he spoke to his partner. He said, is everything okay over there? And he's like, at his partner's like, yeah, sure. Why? So it is the way that they reach a consensus in Israel, and you also see that there's no hierarchy. So it doesn't matter your position. No. You can be telling the CEO that you don't agree with his idea and being a project manager. So, but there they do believe that that's one of the ways that they're able to solve problems.
It works great. All the meetings are you sit in a circle, which is what we actually do here. I learned some management and how to manage the science from the leaders there. Mike Vidney's a great leader, and I anticipate him, starting something else. And they have a great new CEO, and they've raised, as I mentioned, a ton of money, and we were sort of part of that as an ancillary partner. But I'll be honest, it just the style was amazing, and it did shock me a little bit because there was a lot of back and forth, but it works. Obviously it works, and you get used to it, and then you're in the middle of it then too. So you're absolutely right.
So we have another few minutes, and I'd like Andrea to maybe talk about the next few steps. If anybody here is interested, if you don't have any more questions, right? If you're interested in applying for BIRD, whether for the September or the March deadline, what would be your next steps, Andrea?
So first, obviously, it's to find a partner. And in order to do that, again, and we've said this several times, you're looking for a company. And if it's the regular BIRD, you're looking for a company as opposed to a university that has complementary technologies to yours. Get in touch with Vered and I will lead you through that process. One of the new things that both of us have been doing, I used to in the past, we subscribed to a database. So based on my knowledge, Vered's knowledge, and this database we still subscribe to, Israel Venture Capital, we would send a list similar to Eric. Since then, there's a new database that's available free online to anybody. It says to log in, but you don't have to, and you don't have to be a member to use it, and you don't have to pay to use it. I've been pointing people to that database. It's called Israel Startup Nation Central. So Startup Nation Central. So if you just Google Startup Nation Central Finder, it'll take you right there. You click on companies. You'll see they have over, I think, almost 7,000 companies on there. And any company that's worthwhile knowing is on that database, both large and small. You can play with it, search it by your topic of interest or the technology that you're seeking. And I found, in many cases that the company does their own initial homework, as Eric said, identifies a couple companies they think would be of interest. They come to Violet and I. We request from them a one-pager and a value proposition that they write specific to each company they want us to introduce them to, so that we know, what to say to the company, what they're seeking. We will offer it up to the Israeli company. If they agree, we set up an introductory call and we'll host that, at least the first one. Several of them, as many as need be, until the company reaches a partner. And after that, the companies typically will sign NDAs and have technical discussions that we're not involved with. And if they decide to come back and submit to us, that's when we'll assist them in taking that next step. And that does take time, so you're not gonna you're not gonna find your significant other in a week. So you do want to be careful. You want to speak to companies. You want to make sure you feel comfortable. And even in this submission, you're not required to move forward in the process. So you can submit an executive summary, see how that goes. It's a good test of your relationship. Move forward to a full-scale proposal. It's only after your project's been approved and you've signed your company-to-company agreement, your cooperation project and funding agreement, that you then get an advance on the first segment of your project. So there's quite a bit of time to make those, have those discussions.
Our time is up, and I really first would like to thank everybody, Carla and Nisarine from the World Trade Center, and Michael with Delaware Bio, and of course our speaker Eric from Christiana Care, as well as my Andrea Yona with the Barish Foundation. Please reach out to Carla, Michael, Andrea, and myself if we can be of any help to help coach you, connect you to pursue bird grants, whether it's life sciences or any other innovation. Andrea and I can maybe stay another few questions if you want to ask any questions, but I'd like to respect your time and appreciate it. And Carla or Michael, is there anything you want to add?
I just want to say thank you. And we're here at the World Trade Center to do programs like this to help you expand your business and reach your goals.
Likewise, thanks so much, everybody. Eric, fantastic presentation. It's really exciting opportunity. I love the guidance about sometimes having to go through a first run and getting that kind of feedback. And I'm sure there's probably companies that's going to resonate with. We love Philadelphia. We love the tri-state area, but we are always here to help any companies that are on the line or those you may connect with in Israel to see the beautiful wonders of the first state. So thanks so much, Carla and team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Take care.
Thank you. Andrea, you want to stay? If anybody, I don't think they have questions, but if anybody has questions. No. Okay. So long, everybody. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. Have a great weekend.
That was
Thanks
great.
again.
Wonderful. Bye.
Thanks to
Great job.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.